Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for taking a few minutes to tune in out here in the tackle room tonight. And man, it's really hot out here. The tackle room, as you know, is not heated or cooled. So in the wintertime, it can be 30 degrees in here. And like right now, it feels like it's 95, but I got to get the door shut because got the air conditioner compressor kicking on. So pretty steamy in the room here right now tonight. So anyway, today's got a tip, guys. I want to give you guys a good foundational lesson, basic how to work a plastic worm 101. I think that, everybody knows plastic worm fishing is the greatest all-time bass catcher that there is. I mean, there's been more bass caught on a worm than any other one. I think we take it for granted a lot of times that people know how to fish a worm. And I don't really mean rigging it, because there's a lot of different tutorials on YouTube about how to rig a worm, but I specifically want to talk about today about how you need to work a plastic worm through the water. So we'll get into that a little bit here. First of all, the worms that I use, it doesn't matter if I'm using just a traditional curly tail plastic worm like the Zumo Monster, straight tail, any type of worm. I usually have a variety of techniques that I use as far as how I work this worm through the water. And a lot of it has to do whether I'm casting a worm or if I'm pitching or flipping a worm. So what you want to do, the first thing is a lot of the rhythm and the action that you put on a worm has to do with the weight of your sinker that you use. And on plastic worms, you can use anywhere between no weight to an ounce if you want to, but most of the time when I'm fishing a plastic worm, I'm usually using anywhere between a 1/8 ounce to maybe a 3/8 ounce. Sometimes half. Sometimes I'll go up to half, like on a big worm. If I'm fishing this in the summertime, like on deep brush or something, I may use a half. But for the most part, it's an 1/8 ounce to a 3/8 ounce sinker. So let's start out a little bit with the system that I've sort of came up with about how to work a worm based upon the weight that you're throwing. In general, the lighter the weight that I'm using, and I'm talking now specifically if I'm casting a plastic worm, like casting it, in deep water, casting it around grass beds, making long casts with a worm. I'm not talking about pitching or flipping it. If I'm using the lighter sinkers, like the 1/8 and 3/16 ounce sinkers, most of the time, those lighter sinkers, I'm tending to work the worm slower, dragging it more. So I'll cast out there, pick up the slack, keep the worm. You always want to keep your rod tip at like anywhere between like 10 or 11 o'clock. And on a light sinker, I'm mainly just pulling it and maybe shaking it just a little bit. I'm not really hopping it. I want that worm I want the worm to take advantage of the light sinker by sort of crawling around the bottom slowly like that. If you hop it off the bottom with a lighter sinker, you're obviously going to have a slower fall. But I've found out that I get more bites when I'm fishing a lighter sinker if I just sort of drag it, just twitch the rod tip, dragging it at the same time, not really making it come up off the bottom. Now, if I'm fishing a heavier sinker, like anywhere between, say, a 1/4 ounce up to, again, 3/8 or half, it doesn't matter if I'm fishing grass or points or deep water, that's when I'm hopping the worm more. So I'll cast it out there, keep my rod tip at 10 or 11 o'clock, and I'm just hop it just like that, work it, hop it off the bottom, 3 or 4 inches off the bottom. So I'm just wanting that worm just to, sort of go like that through the bottom a little bit. With the heavier sinker, what happens is when you pop it off the bottom, that worm will fall faster, and that'll create a reaction strike. And sometimes that reaction strike is a key on catching fish on plastic worms, pitching, flipping, or casting. So I tend to hop them more with a heavier weight. Now, if I'm flipping, the way that I work is a little bit different. Most of the time, if I'm flipping a plastic worm, I'm flipping it like in holes in the grass. I'm flipping it around boat docks. Sometimes I'm flipping it around lay down logs, that type of stuff. Normally what happens when I flip that bait in there, and it doesn't matter if I'm using a lighter sinker or heavier sinker, most of the time when I'm pitching or flipping a worm, the type of cover dictates the weight, size that I'm using, but ideally I like to use a 1/4 ounce sinker. I find out when I'm pitching or flipping a worm on a 1/4 ounce sinker, I simply get more bites. But I'll pitch it in there, let the worm go to the bottom, and then I'll just pop it up in one place off the bottom, just like that, maybe 3 or 4 inches off the bottom. And then sometimes after I pop it 3 or 4 times, I let it stay on the bottom and I dead stick it. I don't let it move at all. So, and then maybe twitch a little bit after that. So I'll say, for example, I'll pitch in a lay down, goes to the bottom, snap it off the bottom 3 or 4 times like that, let it go to the bottom, just hold it there for maybe 10 seconds, and then maybe just shake it a little bit. If I don't get a bite, I'll throw it in there and make another cast. Now, as far as the basics of, and we'll go just a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about the hook sit on a worm. But the hook sit on a worm is really critical too. I know this was videos about working a worm, but I will talk a little bit about hook set. The hook set on a worm, the big key, guys, is you want to make sure the line is tight before you set the hook. Don't ever throw out there and you feel a bite and you can see the line moving out with it. Don't like reel down and set the hook. What you want to do is when you see that line moving out, reel down to the fish until you feel your rod tip starting to load up a little bit, and then just pull back into it and reel super hard like that. Don't set it on a slack hook, because you're going to lose a lot more fish than if you set it on a tight line like that. That'll really help it out a lot. But anyway, plastic worm fishing simple. That's why it's so effective, is because as long as you've got that worm on the bottom most of the time, you can even make some mistakes and still get a few bites. One other thing I'll leave with you guys real quick is sometimes I do swim a plastic worm if the fish are suspended. Sometimes if you're fishing around objects like standing timber, around deeper boat docks, even on some deeper laydowns off steep banks, a lot of times what I'll do, especially in the summertime and the fall time of the year, is I'll throw that bait out there, count it down to where I think the fish are, and I'll just keep my rod tip high and just slowly start cranking it back in, especially with these big twisty tail worms. I set a Central Pro-Am one-day record at Truman Lake with 25 pounds swimming a plastic worm through suspended fish and deep treetops doing that, so I know it works pretty good with that. So anyway, guys, that's just some real simple, basic 101 how to work a plastic worm. There's a lot of different variables for worm fishing. Line size, rod setup, areas. We'll get into all that later on, but I just wanted to do a quick video on that. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much appreciated. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll be back soon. See you.